All right. Oh, man. I turned 41 next month. But, no, seriously, wait, listen to me first. Before the more seasoned people calm down. But, I'm getting to that point now when, I stand for too long, my knee starts to hurt. Yeah, I don't know how some of you are still walking. All right. Okay, well, yeah. If you want to open up your Bibles to Esther, we are going to finish up the book of Esther this evening. I figured that we did a couple chapters. Did we do five? We did 5, 6, 7, right? No, we did. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. See, 5, 6, 7. We did 3 chapters. I figured we could do it again. And here's the main reason why is because I wanted to get done before Purim, which Purim will start the 25th. So next Thursday starts Purim. So you can celebrate Purim, or at least when you hear about Purim, you know exactly what it is. The other side of that too is we're going to be, man, my knee hurts. We're going to be, do you want to come rub it out? No. We are going to start the book of Job, which, again, 42 chapters. If we hurry through it, it's at least 16 weeks, which puts us right in the middle of June, which we take our summer break from Wednesday nights, and I would like to finish it. And so we'll try it, see if we can do 2 weeks in a row of doing 3 chapters and see how that works. So, all right. So we came to the point in this record now where the main villain is dead. Remember, Haman is dead. He's hung on his own gallows. He was determined to execute and extinguish the Jews and destroy all of them. But God has intervened, right? And we've seen God throughout this, God being sovereign, God intervening. He allows, Esther to go and speak to the king, and then she says, hey, let's take a little bit more time. Let's meet tomorrow. And during that time, during that hesitation, the king gets divine insomnia, right? He says, hey, read to me the records. And then he finds out about Mordecai. So one win there. On top of that, it gives Esther more time to be praying through things. And then also, too, Haman's like, man, I'm so bummed about what I did. And his wife and his bros get together and they say, you know what would make you feel better? Is if you make some gallows and you can hang people. And then every day you can look out there and see Haman hung and dead. Won't that be awesome for you? And so, again, he goes, honey, that's why I married you. You know my heart. And so God prepares those gallows, which again, where he will be hung. And that's kind of where we ended. Chapter 8, as we follow into what the Lord is doing here, we follow this story all the way through. Now, I do want to say this because somebody had mentioned a couple weeks ago, just about how this story here, again, next to the Torah, this is the most read section of Scripture you will ever find, in Judaism, period. Next to the Feast of Passover, really the Feast of Purim, which again, the Feast of Purim is not instituted by the Lord. It's something that the people celebration feast that they started, and we'll look at some of that. But it really is, it's so important to them. And here's the reason why, is because you find the same story that we find here in Esther all the way throughout the Bible. Revelation chapter 12, it tells us when you study that, there's a picture, if you remember when we went through it, the picture of a woman clothed with the moon and the stars, and it's a picture of, God's plan clothed in Israel, that God has always had a plan for Israel, right? From Abraham all the way down. And we continue through this story here. This people would bring forth, Israel would bring forth this man, right? The Messiah, the one who would bring Jesus Christ. And so God has worked and preserved, and you can read all the way back into Genesis chapter 3, where God puts enmity between, mankind and the serpent. We have the falling of man in Genesis chapter 3. And again, Satan there is laying out this bait before Adam and Eve, that they've taken, hey, you can be like the Most High God. And we've read, on Sunday mornings through Isaiah chapter 14, where that was the thing that he really wanted. I will make myself like the Most High. And then God creates mankind in his image and likeness, and there's this hate and disgust that Satan has for mankind. He hates mankind, again, because of that. And all throughout this process, we see Satan trying to destroy the journey of this promised seed, right? All the way from, we look in the book of Genesis, where Satan tries to pollute the seed of mankind, right? This certain seed that would bring forth the Messiah, and then we hear about it in the flood, all the way from Egypt with the firstborn being thrown into the Nile, right? I was reading this morning about, but Athaliah, who was the one who tried to usurp Jehoash, she tries to wipe out the kingly line, the last male line, the seed of David. They tried to wipe out the royal line, and God preserved the Messiah throughout that. And here we see Haman trying to do the same exact thing. He gives out this decree to what? Not just wipe out Mordecai, but wipe out all Jews. And there's more to it than just Haman having an issue with the Jews, right? He's an Amalekite. He's one of the, he's from Agag, the king of the Amalekites. But there's more to that because there's the spirit of the Antichrist. And again, there's, to me, nothing more outside of rejecting Jesus Christ himself, more satanic than anti-Semitism. When we read about some of those sort of things, this constant record that Satan does that, because Satan hates the fact that one day there'll be one king ruling in one city over one earth, over one people, right? And he's constantly been trying to stop that. And all throughout history, we have ramblings of people that have been trying to wipe Israel off the map. And again, I love it because you go to Israel today and you'll have a Jewish guy giving you a tour of all the ruins of all the people that have tried to ruin them. And it's comical. And so there's always an Antichrist lurking in history, waiting for the opportunity, because Satan wants to wipe out. But Haman here isn't able to do it. So there's some great lessons for us. Haman is hung on his own gallows, and again, there's Hamans all throughout the centuries. But chapter 8 says this: "And on that day, Hazaras gave Queen Esther the house of Haman." Now, no doubt Haman's house was a palace, right? I mean, he's willing to spend $154 million to wipe out the Jews. He's prime minister of the biggest and most powerful and prominent kingdom that there is. So no doubt he has this palace. Again, that $154 million was 3/4 of the annual taxes that the whole Persian Empire took in. So this guy had some cash flow, right? And the king here Xerxes gives Esther his house. Again, no doubt nobody was as rich to him or as wealthy as the king himself. But what it tells us is that Haman was considered a criminal. If you died in the Persian court at all, your family received everything, right? There was no probate. There was none of that. Your family instantly got everything. The only time that your family was left out of any sort of income or house or items that you had is if you were considered a criminal of the state. And so last time we saw Haman with the king kind of seals his death order. The guys come and cover up his face here. But again, he was a wealthy man. Xerxes considers him a criminal, so he gives Esther his mansion. And it says, "The enemy of the Jews and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther told him how he was related to her." So again, she says, "Hey, Morty over here." I don't know if that's what I'm assuming she called him. Morty over here, he's my first cousin, but he raised me. So because I'm your wife, he's related to you. And I think, man, how cool was that for the king to realize, hey, the guy that saved my life is related to me. And how God is bringing all that. And we're going to see here, God is moving in the right order and the right timing. It may not have been their right order or their right timing, but God is moving and working. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. So the ironic part is he becomes prime minister, right? Everything that Haman wanted, Mordecai now has. So Esther, verse 3, spoke again to the king and fell down at his feet and implored him with tears. That's not fair, right? Come on. To counteract the evil of Haman, the Agagite, and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. So Haman is dead, but remember the Persian law is, Daniel tells us what the Persians pinned constantly stayed. So you couldn't change it all. So even though he's dead, his edict is still here. Now they have a number of months, we'll see, before the edict is going to be played out and the Jews are going to be slaughtered. But now she's going to the king and saying, hey, can we not change this? Now historians tell us in in the Persian Empire at this time, there's 50 to 80 million people in the Persian Empire. 7 to 10 million of those are Jews. So it is a huge number. Remember, this is Ezra and back in Jerusalem. This is Zerubbabel. This is Joshua. We look at these people. Esther comes before the king. She falls down and she says, hey, Haman is dead, but his edict is still alive. And the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther rose and stood before the king. So he's accepting her. And said, if it pleases the king, and if I found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all of the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see an evil which has come to my people, and how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? So she's asking a lot. Right? Hey, I know this is not the way it is, but let's change it. Why can't we do this? And it's an interesting picture because, there's a typology here in Esther that I won't spend a whole lot of time on, but she really has such a unique role, and again, in her heart towards not just the king, but also too for her people. Right? She's safe. Right? We've already established she's safe now. The king's not going to let anything happen to her. Her cousin, who raised her, as his own daughter, is prime minister. No evil is going to come upon her. She has everything, all the attention, all the wealth, all the prosperity, everything that people of the world say, this is what makes you happy, this is what makes you satisfied, this is, everything that you would need. And yet she's not fulfilled because she says, how can I endure when I know what will come upon my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? I thought about this quite a bit this afternoon, what should be our position before our king? When we see, the destruction around a generation or a nation or a world, what should our response be? Because we read things like, if you reap to the wind, or if you sow to the wind, you reap a whirlwind. That's a scary one, right? If you throw it to the wind, you weep devastation. There's, somebody sent me a letter, which I read through, and it was just like, how many things are wrong with, every country in the world. And I was like, yeah, I know. But reading through some of that, and you see wars, like at any given time in the world, there's like 45 wars that are going on that we don't know about. The amount of abortions and abuse and addiction, immorality, thumbing our nose at the Creator, and all of these things that are going on, violence, and what should our position be? Because Esther goes before the king, she says, I'm safe, right? We're safe, right? But what should our position be? Because she's brokenhearted about, what's going to happen to everybody else around. She has this conviction upon her heart. It's interesting, again, and looking through this, reading through somebody like Ezekiel, who's not a whole lot of years before Esther. And Ezekiel says this, it says, the Lord said, I sought for a man among them that I might make a hedge or I might make a wall that should stand in the gap for me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. And notice what he doesn't say. It doesn't sound like I was looking for a group or for a denomination or for a church. So I was looking for one person to stand in the gap, or to stand in the wall, for this group of people. And it's easy, we can fall into this state where we just want to gripe or complain. Not you guys, right? The other people. Right? Gripe and complain or moan or groan, or we get ulcers over this stuff. And I really see a challenge here because God says, I'm looking for one person to stand in the gap for a whole nation. I'm looking for one person that would stand in the gap. I sought for a man or a woman that would stand in the gap, that would make that hedge, but I found none. And that's amazing to me because we have this bride here going to the king, right? Going to her groom, pleading, saying, what about everybody else? And it was convicting to me this afternoon, again, and looking through this, because it stirs something in my heart. Really easy to complain. You can turn on the news, you can read an article, and just complain about how one group or one side or one this or one that, or if everybody thought like me, and if, right? Man, if everybody was as smart as me, man, if everybody's as smart as me, we'd be in trouble, right? Okay, that we already know that. So then it comes to, well, what can I really do? And God says, was looking for one person that would do this for a nation, that I could save the whole nation and redeem the land. It says, then King, verse 7, Hazaras said to the queen, Esther, and to Mordecai the Jew, indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hands on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet, that whatever is written in the king's name or sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So they have a problem here. The problem is he can't reverse it. And he says, I can't reverse this. And again, Daniel tells us, but he says, what we can do is we can add to it. You can counter this with another measure. So take my ring and write another letter to change this. So the king's scribes were called at that time. Again, they're the most intelligent guys, right? They're kind of like the politicians, for lack of a better word, right? They're the guys that know what to say and how to. I'm trying to be kind here, okay? So I don't mean that as a slander. But they're the guys that know what to say and how to say it in the right way, okay? Calm down. So the king's scribes were called at that time on the third month, which is the month of Sivan, which is the 23rd day. So this is June 25th, 474 BC. So they're there. Again, remember the first decree was made on April 17th. So their part into that D-Day for them is going to be March 7th. So he gets the most intelligent people around. He says, we have to figure out a way to stop this. It says, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded the Jews and the satraps and the governors and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. So he writes it down not just to the leaders, but to every single person in whatever, not just language, but whatever form. When you look at guys like like Strabos, who are historians that talk about during this time, there are people that wrote on papyrus, there's people that wrote on wood, there's people that wrote on clay, people that engraved on stone. And so not only did they do that, but they changed it into every single language. This took a lot of time, right? It's like today, we're sitting down to eat, and because sometimes like background is everything, right? We're sitting down to eat, and I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but I said something, and I said, well, you know what Napoleon said? And I said this, and the kids are all looking at me, and they're like, Napoleon Dynamite never said that. And I was like, I'm not talking about Napoleon Dynamite. I'm talking about Napoleon, the Emperor of France. And they're like, oh, because it's way different. So there's a language barrier, right? Even between generations. So they have to make it so that everybody understands. Yeah, the day I start quoting Napoleon Dynamite, kick me out of here, okay? Verse 10, it says, and he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it the king's signet ring, and sent the letters by couriers on horseback. Remember, their own Pony Express every 14 miles, they would get on a new horse. Right on the royal horses bred for swift steeds. Literally, the Hebrew says a team of royal young horses. So Xerxes allows Mordecai to get the youngest, fastest, most able, best bred horses that they could go out and spread this. He says, let's make this as fast as possible. Verse 11, by these letters the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives. So literally what it says is that he allowed them to muster an army. Now that would be not kosher for them to be able to do in any other way. The king says, hey, but on this day, I'm allowing you to gather a little kind of troop together, a little army together in order to protect yourself. To destroy and kill and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. One day of all the provinces, King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So he can't alter the first decree, but what he says is, hey, this is what you can do. You can counteract the second decree. Make the second decree that you can make an army just on this one day in order to defend yourselves. So we have, again, Esther's there. She pours out her heart to the king. The king says, hey, I can't change the law, but I can counteract the law. I mean, there are so many different ways and avenues we could look at this just with even what Christ has done. Again, Romans, how can God be just and the justifier? Right? God can't change that the wages of sin is death. But he can counteract it with what he's done on our behalf, and bringing Christ and allowing us to be able to have life in the Spirit. And so this new edict goes out. Verse 13 says, and a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree to every province and published to all people, so that the Jews would be ready on the day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So again, the king now is pro-Israel, but he's also asking them to be proactive. So he's saying, I'm putting out this decree here, but you guys need to act upon this as well. And the couriers who rode on the royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan the citadel. Remember, Shushan there is where the winter palace is. So they're hastened and pressed by the king's decree, right? Same thing you and I should be doing. The king's decree that he's given us, go out into Jerusalem, Judea, and, just Samaria, the uttermost parts of the world. There should be a hastening and a pressing for us to want to do that. It says, so Mordecai, verse 15, went out from the presence of the king with royal apparel, with blue and white, and a great crown of gold, and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. So the first time the decree went out with Haman, our people were confused. Even in Shushan, they were like, what is going on? Now this one comes forth, and there's gladness in Shushan. It's also, too, they know their queen is Jewish now, and their prime minister is Jewish, right? So it's a good time to be Jewish now in Persia. It says, the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came. The Jews had joy and gladness, feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, just like I said, because fear of the Jews fell upon them. So again, they're saying, hey, this is really good. Now, some translators say, well, that doesn't really mean that they became Jews. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of this, says that many people became circumcised on that day. Okay, the only reason why you're going to do that is because you're converting, okay? So evidently that's what they were doing. They become Jews. They saw God's favor and God's hand on these people, and so they begin to have this testimony, and people begin converting. Chapter 9. Man, I'm getting so used to doing multiple chapters. It says, now in the 12th month, it was in the month of Adar, and the 13th day came the king's command. So now we have February, March of 473 here. The king's command is decreed to be executed on the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. The opposite occurred, and the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces, and King Hazaras to lay hands on those who sought to harm them. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. So God is working, right? Just like in Joshua. Remember, Joshua sent spies out with Rahab, and she's like, hey, we've heard. Like even the men have heard. And I love what she says. She says, people are melting in front of these stories, like when they hear the things that God is doing. And so they're afraid. They're taking it all in. Verse 3, and the officials of all the provinces and the satraps and the governors and all of the doing of the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Again, people are probably thinking, I'm going to switch sides here because the queen is now Jewish. This is the new fad. The queen is a Jew. The prime minister is Jewish. And so they're like, you know what? I don't want to mess with these people at all. Verse 4, for Mordecai was great in the king's palace. Literally had lots of integrity and power, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent. So like Joseph did with Pharaoh, like Daniel did with Nebuchadnezzar, he held great position and great regard. People looked at him and they understood who he was, and he had great respect. Thus the Jews defeated all of their enemies with the stroke of a sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased to those who hated them. So we're going to find out here, this is 75 to 76,000 men. right? Because only the men are coming out to war against him. And we're going to hear something a couple or three different times here, and I want you to take note of it. It's 3 times it's going to say they did not take the spoil. That's important, and we'll see why. But they're defending themselves, right? This is not malicious, let's just wipe out anybody. But this is, hey, the king's edict is you can defend yourself, defend your families, defend the women and the children, the elderly, you can defend them. And so their word has been spread, but thousands are dying. Again, millions were going to be wiped out, but thousands are killed during this time. And it says, and in Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Now, Shushan, we're told, has a population of about 500,000 people. So yes, it's a lot of people, but percentage-wise, it really is. I think by this time, people are like, because remember, they're all gung-ho, right? They're sharpening their pitchforks at the very beginning of this. They're confused, but they're like, well, if we're going to have a killing party, I guess we should do it. And so now things have changed. A new edict comes, and they're like, okay, now in the citadel, or in the citadel here in Shushan, there's probably only going to be, some of people that are going to rise up that are still probably, on Haman's side, right? Because remember when Haman tells us about how good he is, he goes back to his house. He's like, am I not handsome? And am I not rich? Am I not strong? I assume he's like looking in the mirror, like all this sort of stuff back and forth. Now, verse 7, 8, and 9, it gives us the 10 sons of Haman. So it says here, also, Parshatha, oh man, I even practiced this too. Parshan Partha. So all these names are really interesting. His name literally means given forth of the light or dripping. Delphon, which means dripping or dripping with excellence, we would probably say, like overflowing with excellence. As Patha, which as Patha just means given by the horse or given to straight power. I'm powerful. Poratha, which is fruitful ointment. It's interesting because it means fruitful scent or power, or also frustration, like frustration of all those other people that you're against. Dahlia, which means I will be drawn up of God, or I'm pulled up by God because I'm powerful. Or Didyatha, which means the lion of the decree, or the one who is strong as a lion. Parmashta, which means I am superior, or have a strong fist. Arise, which means like a lion, or the lion is my banner. Aride, which means as strong as a lion, or a lion is enough. And Vazartha, which means strong as a wind. Now, they might all sound way different, but they really are pretty much the same exact name. It's kind of like George Foreman, right? You know how George Foreman has like 700 kids that are all, I don't know how many kids he has, a lot. But they're all named like George 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, George Jr., Georgie, continue. That's kind of what he did. He named all of his sons, his 10 sons here, all these really prominent names. Now, what's interesting is next week when you're celebrating Purim, when the Jews celebrate Purim, the tradition is interesting. They'll read through the account of Esther, right? You sit through, and whenever Haman's name is rung, you make a sound, or you grab your graggle and you make noise to scream, to blot out his name. But in the synagogue, when they read through this on the last day, whenever they read these 10 sons' names, they have to do it in one breath. And I really tried. I practiced for like 15. Okay, that's a lie. I practiced for like an hour. Okay, I wanted to be able to do it. And the reason why they do it in one breath is because they say they were all wiped out in one breath. I don't know how. I mean, I was almost passing out. Like, I was here in my office. Somebody was painting. They were coming by. Like, are you all right? I was like, I'm just trying to say a bunch of names in one breath. And he's like, wow, you guys are weird here. So Haman's 10 sons, again, they're wiped out. So if you're the reader for this section of Esther, it's a tough read, right? So try it. But have some smelling salts around. I don't want to try to touch that one. I tried earlier and it was not good. So verse 12 or verse 11. Oh, where are we? 10. There we go. Hey, calm down, guys, okay? And it says, the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedath, the enemies of the Jews, they killed, but they did not lay hand on the plunder. So the second time they didn't take anything from the spoils. And on the day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan and the citadel was brought to the king. So the king is getting a report of how many people are being wiped out. And the king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's province? He says, man, I wonder what it was like. Like we saw what it was like here. I wonder what it was like everywhere else. Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. Or what is your further request? And it shall be done. Hey, honey, what else can I do for you? Right? That's basically what he says to her. And Esther said, if it pleases the king, let it be granted the Jews that are in Shushan to do it again tomorrow according to today's decree, that Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. So she says, hey, just here in Shushan, in the capital, this is what I'm asking. There might still be a conspiracy to wipe out the rest of the Jews, right? Maybe people are waiting, hey, we know they're going to wipe us out today, so let's wait till tomorrow. She says, let's give us one more day to settle these things. And then as a deterrent, let us take the 10 sons of Haman that are already dead and hang them. Now, remember on the gallows, we talk about hanging. This is impaling, right? This isn't by a rope. This is on a big honking pole. And those gallows are where? In Haman's front yard, right? Which is now Mordecai's house. And I don't know if he left it there, but it seems like he did. He's like, oh, that's an interesting decor you got going on. Verse 14, it says, so the king commanded that it be done, and the decree was issued in Shushan, so this is just in the capital city, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. So their bodies are put up there, and again, it reminds me of where God had told Abraham, like, I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. That's never been revoked for Israel ever, and we see that continually. So the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Shushan. And they did not lay a hand on the plunder. So another 300, but again, for the third time, they're not going to touch this plunder at all. And the remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. There was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, on the 14th of the month, they rested and made a day of feasting and gladness. So again, 3 times they say they didn't touch the plunder or the spoil. Remember, this 75 to 76,000 men are all the way from India to Ethiopia, right, to North Africa. And this is in defense. And we see that all throughout modern history. I read something a while ago, and I can't remember who I was reading from, but they were telling a story about a Jewish man who was brought before Hitler. And he was telling him all the plans, how he was going to wipe out all of Israel and all of the Jews, and this older Jewish man began to laugh. And as Hitler became more irritated, this older man began to laugh louder and louder and louder. And Hitler looked at him and he said, you don't think that I can do this? You don't think that I can wipe out your people? And he began to laugh more and more. And he said, there is no way that you can wipe us out. And Hitler he was irritated, and he said, every time somebody tries to wipe out my people or exterminate the Jews, we end up with a new feast or holiday. And this, at the very end of it, he says, I wonder again what the name of this holiday will be. Passover, right? Pharaoh tries to wipe out the Jews. Purim, we have Haman. Hanukkah, Antiochus III tries to wipe out the Jews. And so again, I'm just wondering again, what, until the Lord's return, is that going to ever try to happen again? And what other feast will they have? But it's very true. So again, he says, verse 17, on the 13th day of the month of Adar, which is the 14th of the month, they rested and made a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day, as well as the 14th. And on the 15th of the month, they rested and made a day of feasting and gladness. So this is the way it happens, and it still kind of happens this way today in Israel, depending on how you celebrate Purim, right? So they will celebrate on the 13th and the 14th. Some people will celebrate the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. So what happened here in Shushan was they're saying, hey, since we had an extra day, we won't celebrate. We won't have a full party, right? No piñatas until the 15th day. So they extended it one more day to party. Therefore, the Jews of the villages, verse 19, who dwelt in the unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday and for sending presents to one another. So again, it's kind of like Christmas and Halloween and Thanksgiving kind of rolled in. That's the best we can understand. And Mordecai wrote down these things and sent letters to the Jews near and far who were in all the provinces of King Hazaras, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th day of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews had rested from their enemies, and the month which they turned from sorrow to joy for them, in the mourning to a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending presents to one another and gifts to the poor. So everybody's included all throughout. So the Jews accepted the custom which they had begun. Also Mordecai had written to them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, plotted against the Jews to annihilate them and to cast a pur, that is a lot. So Purim just means lots, plural. So pur is lot, Purim is lots, to consume them and destroy them. So again, we read at the very beginning when we started Esther, Proverbs tells us that it says that a man can cast a lot into his lap, but the disposing is in the Lord's hands. So Haman cast a lot. He had no idea what lot he was really casting, though. Verse 25, it says, "But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that the wicked plot of Haman be devised against the Jews should return to his own head, and that his son should be hanged in the gallows. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of the letters which they had seen concerning this matter and what had happened to them, the Jews established and imposed it upon themselves and their descendants and all those who would join them, that without fail they should celebrate these 2 days every year." And you'll see a lot of everys here in the next couple verses. "According to what is written in the instructions and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants." And again, it continues today. Again, next to the Torah, right, the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, this is the most read book in Judaism. Now, if you're ever in Israel during Purim, because I've been there during Purim, and I remember I was with some friends. We were in Israel, walking through the park late at night, because usually they start at night, right? That's the beginning of the day in Israel is at night. And we're walking through the park, and all of a sudden, people are singing and handing out candy, and they're having barbecues, and they have like fireworks, and I was like, what in the world is going on? And so, like any starving 19-year-old, I wanted to know what was going on because I smelled food. And so I walk over, I'm like, man, what is going on? Like, we missed the memo? Because at first it was kind of creepy. We're walking through the park at night, and down the hill, because I lived in the old city, down the hill you can see people walking like a line. I was like, oh no, they're sacrificing somebody. Like, it started again. And then I hear people kind of singing, and then there's little kids. I'm like, okay, something else is going on. And again, they were having a party. They were feasting. They were giving out gifts. So it still goes on today. What it says here is, it says it starts on the 13th. So on the 13th, they read through this story. The next day, in the morning, they read through Esther, and then they read through Exodus chapter 17. And here's what's remarkable to me is, the reason why they read through Exodus 17 is because that's the story we remember when the children of Israel are coming through the wilderness, and the Amalekites are there. They ask for passage through the Amalekites, say, no way, Jose, rough translation. They don't let them through. They slaughter the weak and the sick and the elderly and all of those that are scraggling behind. And the reason why we're told 3 times that they didn't take any spoils is because they're remembering back to what happened with King Saul. You remember that story? God tells through Samuel the prophet, he says, wipe out. This is not going to be good for you, Saul, right? Which we know an Amalekite killed Saul. This is not going to be good for your people. So I'm asking you to do this. Saul decides to go his own way. And remember, Samuel comes and he confronts him. But Saul comes and he takes all of the spoils from King Agag. And Samuel said, you shouldn't touch this at all, right? This is blood money. And so Israel today, again, you give away. That's part of it, is you're giving everything away. You give away food, you give away prizes. And so they get together again on the 14th, and they read Esther, and then they also read Exodus chapter 17. And then on the 15th day, they have the extended party, right? They have the after party that they continue on. So again, it's kind of like Thanksgiving and Halloween and Christmas kind of, in a weird way, kind of wrapped together, right? All the holidays that we would know. And it really speaks of God's faithfulness to them. You know, just like if I said Thanksgiving, you think of, okay, my family gets together, right? Even if you don't like turkey, I grew up vegetarian, we still had tofu turkey, right? Everybody still had, you think of stuffing and things like that, right? I grew up in California, didn't see snow for Christmas, but I assumed it snowed somewhere for Christmas, right? You still have these visions in your mind. And so whenever they celebrate Purim, which they continue to celebrate Purim, and they celebrate these lots that were cast, they celebrate this deliverance that God had given to them. It says, verse 29, when Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote of the full authority to confirm the second letter about Purim, Mordecai sent letters to the Jews to the 127 provinces of the king Hazaras with words of peace and truth to confirm these days of Purim in their appointed time, as Mordecai to the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, and as they were decreed for themselves and for their descendants concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. So the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. All right, you guys got 3 more verses in you? Because we can't wait another week to do this. Chapter 10, it says, King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the land and on the islands of the seas. And the act of his power and his might and the account of the greatness of Mordecai to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of the Medes and the Persians? For Mordecai the Jew was second to King Ahasuerus, and was great among the Jews and well received by the multitude of his brethren. And this is what you want to be said of any sort of politician or prime minister, right? Seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all of his countrymen. Right? That's what people knew about him. Man, this guy, he seeks our well-being and he speaks peace to all of this. They were destined for annihilation. There was 2 edicts that were given, one unto death, one unto life, not unlike you and I, right? There's 2 edicts. There's one unto death and one unto life. But this ends up in a celebration. And what I love about this story, again, the things that God's name, although it's not written, is seen, like his hand is seen. It's hidden there, right? Those acrostics that are there. But also, too, at given certain times where we would say, or they would say, where is God? How is God going to work? What is he going to do? God is moving and God is working. God had a plan from the very beginning. We have this woman who is there that, is given this advice from this man that says, man, maybe this is the time. Like maybe you were born for this time. Right? It's not a mistake. And do we want to be involved? And I love, again, Mordecai's encouragement to her, like God is going to do this either way. Like you can be involved or not be involved, but God is still going to do this. Right? God is going to give his message to people. He'd love for you and I to be involved in that. He's still going to give it to people. He's still going to give opportunity. There's a woman here who pours out her heart to the king for a nation, who's standing in the gap for this nation. It says here that he's moved exceedingly by the decree and the command of the king. And I think of it and just sort of ending, especially as we move in here to the book of Job, is what really is driving us, like is this heart for this pressing that, man, time is short. Like we have a certain time that God has given to us, this, it's not just something I'm asking you, it's something I've been trying to look at myself, I'm asking myself, I sat with this this morning, and just it kind of like chewed at me for a little bit. Because it's easy to say, like, what are you doing for Jesus? But then it's like when I like walk in, to the bathroom and see myself in the mirror, and it's like, what am I doing for the Lord too? And those sort of things. I want to be able to act not just a hearer, but a doer. And, God works in an amazing way through undeserving people, and he turns the tables. And we've seen this over and over, and just like in Nehemiah, right? He's just a cupbearer. God says, I'm just looking for somebody to stand in the gap, Nehemiah. Are you that guy? And for each one of us, the same thing, will he do that for you? Will he do that for me? If we humble ourselves, the story of Esther is yes. And if we humble ourselves before him, we see God's faithfulness and God's hand. It's the same story over and over and over again, right? The Bible is like the Rocky movies, okay? Focus for a second. It's like the Rocky movies, because it doesn't matter what Rocky you're watching, it's the same exact story, right? Different names, different places, different ages, the same. Adrian is still there, right? It's the same exact thing. I've never actually seen Rocky, but from what I can tell, they all sound, yeah, anyway. My favorite quote from that has to deal with standing in the gap. It's when Rocky is talking to Adrian. Guys, take notes here. This is a good, Valentine's Day is over. But he looks at Adrian, he says, hey, Adrian, you have gaps and I have gaps, and we fill in each other's gaps. It's biblical. You and I should be, sorry guys, we should be standing in the gap. Let's just pray. We should be standing in the gap for one another. God is able to do great and marvelous things. Be reading ahead. We are going to try to plow through Job. Be praying for me, because usually with Job, I sort of take a section and we do a kind of overview. I would really love to teach through it though, which is really hard because there's so much stuff, and the ADHD gets on high alert when it comes to so much stuff going on. So be praying for me, be reading through it. We'll try to see if we can get through a couple chapters next Wednesday. Amen. All right. Lord, we thank you again for your word. Thank you again for gift we have to be able to walk through it. Thank you for these stories like Esther, Lord, where you remind us that you are always working, that your hand is always moving. Lord, for this encouragement and exhortation, that you would raise us up during this time, Lord, that you knew where we'd be in 2021. And so we just ask that we'd be used faithfully. And Lord, in the same way that Esther's heart was broken for everyone else, even though everything seemed so well and great for her, Lord, give us that same brokenness, that same humility that would, again, I think so much about what you said to Ezekiel, Lord, that you were searching everywhere for just somebody who would stand in the gap, Lord. And it's the fact that it wasn't a group or a denomination or a church or an organization, but you were just looking for one person to do that. May that be something that resonates in our own hearts, that may we be doing that, not just for our own community and our own nation, Lord, but it's even for this world that is so lost and so dark and so manipulated by things and so twisted. And we see things being fulfilled that Isaiah said, Lord, the things that are good are called evil, and things that are evil are called good. But that gives us hope, Lord, in knowing that your return is near. And so, Lord, in the time that we have, may we be good stewards of that time and the talents that you've given to us, Lord. May we treasure your word and the relationship we have, Lord. And may it be said, too, of us as it was of Mordecai, Lord, that we have everyone's best interests at hand, Lord, and that we're seeking peace for those around us. So thank you again, Lord, for your word. Lord, we ask that you'd give us a mindset, Lord, as we continue to move through, now moving into the book of Job, that you'd allow us to be able to see that and comprehend what you'd speak through our brother Job. And just ask all this through Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen. God is good, amen.